Can I push it? 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 Hey, can I push it? Guess what's back? It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad that we got our Tuesday nights back together. I hope you've missed our Tuesday 7 p.m.s as much as I have. We haven't been together since last year, but welcome back to Can I Push It? To those that log on every week and to those who are joining us for the first time, grace and peace be unto you from God who loves us as a father and a mother, and Jesus Christ, who's our resurrected, our risen, our reigning, and our returning Redeemer. I tell you what, I missed the theme song as much as I've missed y'all, so I hope you're excited to be back on this Tuesday. When we took our break last year, I said that we come back in February and that we begin a series on the book of Revelation. But things have changed. We've seen a whole lot happen in our nation over the last few months. We've elected a new president and the first African-American female vice president. It's Black History Month. And I think it's really important for us to stop and appreciate our history and our heritage as a way of looking towards our future. One of the passages of scripture that motivates and moves me is when God finds Hagar in the wilderness, this African slave who's running from Abraham and Sarah. And when God finds her, God says to her, "Where have you come from and where are you going?" I like the sequence of those questions. It's a way of reminding us that sometimes as people of color, to know where we're going, we have to first remember from whence we've come. And so for the next few weeks, I want you to join in with me on some discussions about race, Black history, and particularly the Black church. There's a new series coming out on PBS that's going to air on February 16th and 23rd, these upcoming Tuesdays at 9 p.m., simply entitled The Black Church. This is our story. This is our song. The visionary behind it was Dr. Henry Louis Gates, who you know loves to dig into Black history. And I'm going to encourage you as part of our audience to watch that series on the 16th and the 23rd. It plays into the discussions we're going to have during this month of February. We've got a series where we're going to come in and talk about the Black church and the role of women. And in that conversation, we'll have Dr. Yolanda Pierce from Howard University, Dr. Renita Weems, and our own OTOG, Dr. Judy Frenches-Williams. Going to have a conversation with some millennials and talk about the future of the Black church as we welcome Dr. Breonna Parker, Dr. Joshua Mitchell, and Pastor Reggie Sharp in conversation. But tonight, to kick it off, there's no one better that I would welcome to this venue, this conversation, than my brother from another mother. Alfred Street, you know him well. The world knows him well. I would dare say he's probably one of the most renowned and prominent scholars on race in America. He's got a new work coming out called A Long Time Coming, where he's dealing with the reckoning of race in America. He is a member of the Alfred Street Baptist Church, and he's now a professor at Vanderbilt University. Can I push it? Do me a favor. Let's welcome the Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson to Can I Push It? Dr. Dyson, welcome to Can I Push It?
Dr. Wesley, Pastor, it's always great to see you. Better to hang out with you here for a while, and I'm so inspired just to be in your presence, my man.
Man, I am grateful for our friendship, and even more so, I'm grateful for your voice in times like these. We were just talking before we began and how Trump really kind of made it easy for us to re-embrace our prophetic Black voices. So before we begin, what do you see happening in the United States right now? How do you feel about this new election? How do you feel about this new year? What insights do you give us as we march into this new season?
Yeah, it's a great point, Pastor, and I think you're absolutely right. For those who are hesitant to embrace a prophetic stance, prophetic mode, a prophetic idea of the gospel, 45 made it easier to withdraw your 45 and point it out into the world, so to speak, and let loose. But, you know, 3 fateful Wednesdays in January, the insurrection, the inauguration, the impeachment.
Yeah.
There is no question that we are living in historic times. You know, a lot of people get nostalgic and say, man, I wonder what it was to live during those times when things were just popping off every day. And wow, the water hoses and police dogs were attacking Black people, what it would have been like to march with Martin Luther King Jr., hang out with Fannie Lou Hamer. Well, you got your opportunity here to make some history, because these are indeed historic, if not even legendary times, when you think about the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, when, you know, hordes of American citizens, ostensibly patriots, so-called devotees of American democracy, stormed the Capitol.
Yeah.
And in doing so, they claimed to want to take their country back, but they were trying to undermine a real, genuine, and legitimate election. They were trying to reverse what the consequences of democracy had been. And so, unlike the protesters of, say, the George Floyd movement, those who flooded the streets and swelled the numbers of protesters because they were out to protest injustice, racial injustice, to talk about the necessity of accommodating a broader vision of American identity, to talk about racism as a systemic trait, not merely an individual characteristic.
Right.
People have tried to draw a false parallel between, well, what was going on then was, quote, violent. There was very little violence, and the times that it turned violent, most of the protesters argued against it. People were rightfully critical of certain of those elements, but they also understood that in many instances, Black rage is love turned inside out. If Martin Luther King Jr. said that a riot is the voice of the unheard, then rage is the love of the unembraced. So at that level, there was a qualitative difference in pedigree and in kind between what went on in after George Floyd, and what went on when white folk who were pissed, who were angry, who were trying to reinforce white supremacist logic, who were embracing Confederate ideas and symbols, dragging that flag through the Capitol, the most holy and sacred ground on American civic life, the temple of American democracy, desecrated by white citizens who were, quote, thugs and mobs of people trying to undercut it. So when you think about that in January 6th, when you think about the inauguration of the oldest president ever, Joe Biden, I tell you, and there's a sermon of 5 in there, right? Just keep on pushing. You went down the first time, you ain't get it. You went down the second time, you ain't get it. Just keep on trying. I know a Howard John Wesley sermon would kill that. And when you think about him tethered to, Vice President Harris, where you have a woman of extraordinary talent and insight, an HBCU graduate, a Divine Nine. I know y'all into the gang signs and everything. So, so the thing is that when you think about her as an extraordinary figure, it's rather remarkable that she's in that position she's in. And whatever one thinks about President Biden, he set, Kamala Harris up to be the first woman potentially to become president of the United States of America. Ain't nobody had a higher office than her. And so they are trying to forge a compact in a bipartisan fashion as much as they can to try to bring the nation together around a conception of unity, but unity with bite, unity with substance. Because unity and reconciliation, as you know, preach more brilliantly than most, reconciliation without justice is really a kind of empty form of togetherness. The people on the mall were unified, but toward an unjust goal. So unity is the bridge, justice is the destination. We don't worship the Edmund Pettus Bridge. We talk about John Lewis and Amelia Boynton, who marched across that bridge to a greater destiny that eventually resulted in the Voting Rights Act being passed. And then finally, when we think about the impeachment, for the second time, Donald Trump was impeached. And I'll tell you, there's one way to make history, and there's one way not to make history, and that ain't the way you really want to make history. But it bespoke the kind of repudiation of fundamental principles of justice that the man who occupies the holiest spot within the architecture of global empire and power, the Oval Office, that this is like a Manchurian candidate. Like the guy with the most power was doing the most to undermine it. The guy who was the head representative of democracy was undercutting it. And so we saw, I think, the collision of notions of American exceptionalism, manifest destiny, that America was blessed by God to be the moral cop of the world, crashing in on itself. So those 3 Wednesdays, I think, have marked us in a rather striking way. And we just at January, past January into February, it's quite intriguing to see what the rest of the year will bring.
Yeah. You mentioned something that's going to help kind of shift our conversation as I want to talk about race in the Black church. But to what do you attribute this resurgence of white supremacy in America? Now, you and I both know white supremacist ideology has never been destroyed. The civil rights did not remove that. It just made it more closeted. What do you attribute this coming out of the closet with this bold and brazen patriotism, white supremacy, the Karens of the world? How did we get here from where we were?
Yeah, it's a great point, Pastor. And it's extremely important that you have articulated the fact that white supremacy ain't just being called the N-word and ain't just, raising high a Confederate banner of hate, though that is real. These banners of bigotry that are dragged into the open. Mississippi was the last state recently to finally remove the Confederate insignia from its official banner for the state, where and arguably most Black people living, in a state are in Mississippi, ironically enough. So it ain't just all that stuff, but it's also the undergirding logic. So the valuable addition to the George Floyd protests was the notion of systemic racism. Because we know white supremacy is the conscious or unconscious belief in the inherent inferiority of one group and the inherent superiority of the other. And in this case, whiteness as the ideal, whiteness as the norm, whiteness as the unconscious reflex. Many white brothers and sisters don't even know that they're white. They think they're American because whiteness has been rendered universal.
Yeah.
And if whiteness is a universal identity, they get mad at Latinx people, they get mad at Black people, they get mad at indigenous people. Why don't you people stop complaining and kvetching from your position of identity politics? Why don't you just become American? Not realizing that they have not, as you said, outed whiteness as one among many other ethnic and racial choices. As James Baldwin in The Fire Next Time said, whiteness, Blackness, these racial identities are political fictions projected onto the national collective unconscious. And as a result of that, it's the default position of American identity is whiteness. But it was the great philosopher Beyonce Giselle Knowles who said that it's been said that, racism is so American that when you fight racism, it looks like you're fighting America. Yeah. So a lot of white people think, oh my God, you're attacking the country, when what we're attacking is the ideological infrastructure. We're attacking the scaffolding and the way in which white supremacy has built up the architecture of American identity. So the reason it's, I think, popping off now is because there has been an explicit challenge to the rudimentary and fundamental conception of identity that's been put forth by white supremacy. That you can't challenge the superiority of white identity. You can't challenge the norms, practices, and behaviors of white folk. And as a result of that, there's a kind of resentment. And that resentment fuels a kind of white anger that exaggerates the vulnerability of white people. When they hear about Black Lives Matter, then they got to come back with Blue Lives Matter. because they want an answer. First of all, because you're a sophisticated theoretician and philosopher, that's what they call in philosophy an ontological mistake. Because one you're born with in terms of an identity that you inherit as a result of social practices and morals and mores and norms, race, even though we're not born black or white or red or brown, the society dictates the terms of our negotiating with reality based upon some rather objective considerations about racial identity. You ain't born blue unless, and if you are, you better check the doctor for your oxygen supply being cut off, right? Because you ain't born a cop. You're not born a police officer. You're not born law enforcement. So they're trying to, what the philosophers call, make a category mistake, and it's an essentially misled one. So white supremacy has jumped back off because whiteness has been challenged. And the reason those folk, mostly white, not exclusively, but mostly white, and we know white supremacy is not the exclusive preserve of white people. I mean, some of the most effective white supremacists have black skin. It's the ventriloquist effect.
Clayton Bigsby, right? We got the Clayton Bigsby's of the world.
Come on, Doc. You got a black mouth moving, but a white idea speaking through it. The tongue may be black, but the insight and the rhetoric is straight from, white supremacist headquarters. Go look at Undercover Brother and see what I'm saying. So the reality is that I think the resentment has reached a zenith right now because of the efficacy of black pushback, of indigenous pushback, of Latinx pushback. People have finally said, look, we got to be included too. And because we've gotten, relatively speaking, the crumbs off of the table of democracy, those who feel that it is exclusively theirs are fighting back and exaggerating their vulnerability. And I end by saying this. So what's interesting, when we look at the notion of American exceptionalism, that's a line from de Tocqueville in the 1840s and 50s when he came over to do a survey of the American scene. So I'm reminded of Jay-Z and Nas, great friends now, but when they were beefing and, Nas is accusing Jay-Z of stealing his term about dead presidents. And Jay-Z said, you made it a hot line, I made it a hot song. Right? Yeah. So now, we said about Tocqueville, he made it a hot line. Now you're trying to make it a hot nation. You're trying to take American exceptionalism, a line in a classic of political theory and survey, and make it a principle of American identity. We think we are exceptional. We think God has blessed us, manifest destiny. We think that we are to go out here and conquer the world, especially the modern West, and then use that as the basis to argue for our exclusive connection to God in a unique fashion and our unique positioning in the family of nations, that we are better. I dare tell you, there are a bunch of nations think they're special, but everybody's kids are special to them, and everybody's nation is special to them. So white supremacy is the refusal to acknowledge the essential equality of all races and faces and particular identities in this culture, and the refusal to see whiteness as anything but the exclusive norm that establishes the legitimate baseline for American identity.
You hit on something that I think leads to something that's sensitive to me, and how white supremacy has been kind of conflated with patriotism.
Yes.
One of the things that bothers me is how white supremacy has also been conflated with Christianity and Christian norms and Christian values. So I have trouble with this white right evangelical Christianity that stood behind 45 as if he was a prophet or a Messiah, when everything he spoke, everything he did contradicted the ministry, the message, and the life of Jesus Christ. I'm further infuriated when we see these white evangelical pastors with these sound bites. So when you get the Kenneth Copelands, and when you get the Paula Whites, when you get these preachers standing behind this kind of ideology without acknowledging the supremacy and the racism and the injustice that is tied to it. And right now, as you know, there's this huge movement where finally some African-American pastors are pulling out of the Southern Baptist Convention. For those who are not aware, the Southern Baptist Convention is the largest association of Christians in the United States of America. And to this day, not only do many of them still refuse to acknowledge gender equality, but they won't teach racial theory in their seminaries.
Right.
Doc, what comment do you have around this Christian supporting of white supremacy?
Yeah, you've laid it out so brilliantly. And what's remarkable, a guy like you, and I'm not saying this because you're my pastor and just because we're here today, but you're one of the leaders of, progressive Black evangelicalism, radical Black evangelicalism. We ain't trying to leave the perimeters and the parameters of a gospel that is rooted in a very sophisticated, nuanced, and complicated interpretation of the word, but taking it seriously as the beginning point for one's Christian identity. Ain't trying to, in a way, toss it all out the window and throw the baby out with the bathwater, but wanting to retain the ethnic, the racial, the class accents that make it a unique stamp, the imprint of one's own identity on that very gospel. And that's a beautiful and powerful way to go about it. Unfortunately, many of our white brothers, white evangelicals, are doing the same thing, but they're doing it in a way that they are subordinating the cross to the flag.
Yeah.
They are subordinating, in the phrase white evangelical, they're more white than evangelical. Right. And at the end of the day, we got to raise the question that Martin Luther King Jr. said he raised when he pastored churches. Who is your God? What are you worshiping? And Martin Luther King Jr., yes, internalizing liberal theology. Yes, as a 14-year-old kid, a lot of people don't know he denied the bodily resurrection of Jesus at 14. The people say, well, what was Dr. King on, man? That dude was at 14? No wonder you was a prodigy. No wonder you went to Morehouse at 15. Because, dude, what were you reading? Some demythologization of the gospel? But King, who more than King, as a Black evangelical who embraced the gospel to articulate the norms, dispositions, habits, and practices of democracy because they were subordinated to a higher purpose and a higher law. But here's the critical difference. A lot of these white evangelicals think they're following in King's footsteps. No, King used his religious identity to make this a more just nation. White evangelicals are using their political beliefs and their narrow consideration to make this a white Christian nation. And Dr. King never believed in that. He understood the separation of church and state, because if you don't enshrine one as the king, ain't none of them the king. You have the freedom to worship God as you see fit, as the founding fathers talked about it. And plus, you ain't got to have your God enshrined like the Church of England as the one. If God is God, then let God be God. And you have enough confidence in your theological position not to subordinate the state to your narrow denominational consideration, even though as Christians who take our gospel seriously, we want to see those principles translated into American democratic practice, small d. And that means that, look, when people say, well, God put Obama in office, but God didn't put Trump in office. Well, I'm confused. Well, God put Trump in office, but God didn't put Obama in office. Wait, either God put them all in there and God ain't put them none in there. This is what I believe.
Right.
I believe God articulates the principles and ideas that God wants to see prevail. Treat people right, do justly among people, have compassion and mercy. And it's up to us to vote to figure out what that looks like. So don't be blaming God either for Trump or Obama. That's the work of human community, blessed by God, a divine imagination, hopefully, to understand who it is that we should make the choice of, because God has articulated the norms and ideas that should prevail. And so what people get contradictory there, because either God lost power, during, Trump's reign, or did God want Trump to come in, or those who claim that God wanted Obama, but not Trump, Trump, not Obama, Carter, but not Bush, it's kind of confusing. Is God taking weeks off and saying, hey, y'all going to vote because this time I ain't going to be in it? Right? The Super Bowl, it's up to you two, because I don't know if I want Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. So the thing is that when we get down to God micromanaging the universe according to narrow prescription, we miss the bigger picture. And as you were indicating before, it's extremely important for us to understand that white evangelicals have worshiped this flag, have worshiped the particular manifestation of American identity, and are willing to go to the mats to defend it. So when I hear the Southern Baptist Church which had a horrible record during slavery, had a
And
horrible
only
record.
apologized for it in 1990, what, 3 or 4?
Come
They
on, Doc.
apologized for
I mean,
slavery. Come
thank
on.
you. Thank you. I mean, just we didn't say 1893, y'all.
Yeah.
We said 1993, right? They on that slow plan. So here the folk, you know, when they say when God said brain, you thought God said train to give me a slow one. So the thing is that no disrespect to the Southern Baptists. So the thing is that they have worshipped at the altar, as you said, of American identity, conflating patriotism with white supremacy. And that conflation has led to some significant flaws. And I'll end by saying this too. There's a book I was just reading. I think it's called Christian Citizens, and I think it's by Elizabeth Jenkins. And it's a brilliant book that lays out the fight between black and white evangelicals. And from the get-go, white evangelicals were trying to justify and legitimate violence against black people in slavery, violence against black people in Reconstruction, and trying to use God to co-sign their bigotry and to legitimate their white supremacist ethic. Do you know they had the unmitigated gall to pray to God to find a way to deny black people the franchise and the vote? Yeah. And then when you hear about white evangelicals basically worshiping the state, think about Roger B. Taney. I think it was in 1857, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who said, white people, black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. That's what a lot of these white evangelicals believe. That's why they had separate churches. That's why they had separate practices. That's why they got separate theologies. And if you would listen to them, you might end up believing they got separate gods. So that is a form of idolatry that I think needs to call out. They mistake the Second Amendment for the Second Commandment and make craven images of guns to be worshiped and the idols of American craft and statehood as the basis of their very white identities.
Yeah. One of the things we dealt with in Can I Push It a few seasons ago are these lines in the sand that divide people theologically. Mm-hmm. And one that we highlighted was this tension between free will and providence. How much of life in the world is inescapably ordered by God, and how much is a result of our own free will. And I'm more of a free will person. That's not to rob God of omnipotence or omniscience, but it is to recognize that there is a lot we are responsible for. Yes. And I argue that democracy in its foundation and its theology is not an indication of the will of God. It's an indication of the will of the people, which can be wrong. So I don't think you can say Obama or Trump is the will of God. What you can say is that that's the will of the people. That's right. People did that, and now we have to figure out how we interact with God in the midst of that. Yes. Now, with this evangelical, I want to encourage people to read this book called Divided by Faith. And in Divided by Faith, the authors basically argued that white evangelicals deny the systemic capacity of racism by suggesting that racism is individually enacted, that it's simply, since I've never been racist and I've never enslaved anyone and I've never called anyone the N-word, I can deny the universality and systemic nature of racism because it's boiled down to these individual interactions, as opposed to looking at, no, this thing is embedded. I believe Derek Bell was right. This is inextricably woven into the fabric of American society, this racism. And that to me has been the real necessity of the Black church, that the Black church has birthed these men and women who call out the systemic nature, who empower the people to fight, and have really led the change. I would argue to you that any movement of equality in America that historically you take out the Black church, it would not have happened. I'm a product of that Black church. I've seen it at its best and at its worst. How do you see the role of the Black church in the past with this movement? And what's your critique or analysis of where the Black church is today? That's where I wanted to get with you today.
Right. No, you brilliantly laid it out. And I'm right with you. I'm marching in your line because, look, you and I both know there are severe criticisms to be made from within the Black church. We know the homophobia. We know transphobia, we know the gender oppression, all that. All right, that's real. We ain't none of us denying that. I spend a lot of my time talking about that stuff and trying to argue against it. But people, I'm reminded of William Augustus Jones when he said people used to come up to him, one of the great preachers in American history, certainly in Black prophetic,
Yes.
Black radical evangelicalism, right? Because he took the word seriously, but he also took the racial miasma into which we have been thrust quite seriously as well. He said people will come up to him and say, it's a bunch of hypocrites in church. He said, well, come on and join us. There's always room for one more. So, right, because you think, in philosophy, they call it the Archimedean point. Archimedes, the point of objectivity outside of the flow of human history. Ain't nobody standing, up there. Gardner Taylor used to love that Leibnizian phrase, sub specie eternitatis, from the gaze of God. Ain't nobody up there with God. You down here with Wes Montgomery on the ground. My ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. The distance, the gulf between us is real. So the thing is, as you said, we're trying to struggle down here with human will and volition, human intent. One writer talked about the difference between theodicy, theos, God, dikaios, justice, and anthropodicy, right? Human, and this is what you just articulated. That's human will. That's human responsibility. Don't be Xing God about it. Ask the people who messed the thing up from the get-go that God gave the free will to go left or right, to go up or down, to go to Minnesota or Michigan, right? God ain't trying to micromanage your destiny. Wherever you end up, do what you're supposed to do and what God's norms, values, and visions dictate. And then we can begin to fulfill our conception of God's will and see the relationship between the autonomy of the moral agency of the human being, as well as one operating under grace, mercy, and truth from above, right? That's a beautiful interplay. It's more like a jazz symphony and trading parts. It's like Duke Ellington as a symphonic orchestrator and Louis Armstrong as an individual soloist. And so God and human being, like, Armstrong and Duke Ellington, getting together. So for me, it's extremely valuable. But look, Robert McAfee Brown said that the church is like Noah's Ark. If it wasn't for the storm on the outside, you couldn't stand the stink on the inside.
Wow.
So look, it's stinky in the church, but there's a storm out there. And whatever you say about the Black church, as messed up as we've been on some stuff and the narrows we've been, we have sustained human community for Black people. We have been the be all and end all. We have been the place where Black people have gone to seek refuge from a vicious white supremacist society, to seek refuge from the bombardment of our vulnerable egos, to seek refuge from the tyranny of white supremacy and the refusal to recognize our fundamental humanity. So yeah, there's some trauma and troubles in the church. It ain't ideal, but it is such a powerful womb. It is such a place to incubate revolutionary resistance to white supremacy. And the thing is, Pastor, if our white brothers and sisters had more sense and more game and more strategy, especially the Republicans, they'd see that basically, unlike a Michael Eric Dyson, I'm in the church, but I'm on the margins. The average Black person would agree with them morally and ethically about a lot of their issues. A lot more Black folk would be Republican. You go up into these barbershops, you go up in these beauty shops, you listen to Negroes, like, I don't know, but you better calm down all that fancy talking stuff. You better get your butt together. They would understand that if it were not for white supremacy, a lot more Black people would be down for the cause. Even Donald Trump went from 13 to 18% of support for Black men, and quiet as it's kept, upped his numbers by 4% among Black women. And as bad a representative of that wing of the party, so to speak, and that wing of ideology, if they were more attentive to the necessity of being hospitable, open, and gracious to Black people, their numbers would be swollen. I don't want to argue an inherent conservatism, but a pervasive one in Black America. So the Black church, however, has been the institutional infrastructure that has provided safety, an arc of safety away from the horrors and the assaults upon Black identities. And Paul Tillich, the great German theologian, said, he reserved the right to feel a bit arrogant about theology, saying great theology and German theology was redundant in a way. So here's the thing, right? When it comes to preaching and it comes to church life in America, and you talking about greatness, I mean, to say great Black preacher is redundant to me, because even the average cat on the corner with 12 people got more moxie, more swag, more insight, more interpretive power, more hermeneutical energy, and homiletical firepower than a whole bunch of other folk. That is the nature of the gift that has been bestowed upon us. And I think I will never tolerate, Black people just dissing altogether the Black church, trying to throw it away. Yeah, it ain't been perfect, but dadgummit, like Grace Jones, the great theologian, said, I may not be perfect, but I'm perfect for you. So the Black church may not be perfect, but it's perfect for us who seek refuge, who seek identity. And ministers like you, or Otis Moss III, or Freddie Haynes, or Gina Stewart, and on, folk like that who preach sermons every Sunday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever y'all preaching revivals and going out in Bible study and stuff, that allow people to live and thrive and to survive. The reason we are able to make it in the midst of this storm is because the word has seen us through. However we interpret it, however we deconstruct it, the word has seen us through, has given us a vision of a new identity that the world cannot collapse or the world cannot exhaust. This joy I got, the world didn't give it to me, and the word placed in me, the world can never snatch it. That's why I love the Black church.
The Reverend Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, not just doctor. I told you he was the Reverend. He is a preacher. You know what, Doc, as we close up, I am reminded of what C. Eric Lincoln and Lawrence Mamiya said in their book, The Black Church and the African American Experience, that the Black church was the cultural womb of Black America, that out of the church was birthed everything that helps sustain Black people in the vicissitudes of racism, from our schools to our businesses, to our press, to our political leaders, to our prophetic social justice leaders, all came out of the church. But the womb was also a protective place, right? That's where Black identity was protected and shaped and formed so we could go out into the world. So for good and bad, I understand the power of the church. If you're speaking to the next generation of Black church leaders that are watching this or are coming up, these millennials and even younger who are going to inherit this, what word of wisdom in our final section do you give for the future of the Black church with those coming up after us?
Yeah, that's a great point. And that great book, think about The Negro's God by Benjamin Elijah Mays. Think about Gayrard Wilmore's remarkable work. Think about the great Albert Rabato's, brief but powerful book on Black religion. You're so right, though, that people tend to forget that it was a church, but it was the recreation center. It was where people went courting and got married. It was the only
place we could go.
Come on, bro. I mean, so don't be trying to judge people when they come for the women and leave with Jesus. Oh, Jesus is here too? Oh, okay. I ain't even know about that. Okay, that's a benefit, dog. I didn't know. So the thing is that it was our be all and end all. It was the measure, the depth, the breadth of our moral aspiration. It grounded our, philosophical conception of the world, and it gave us practical wisdom. And it gave us vocational training. I mean, for every vocation we were doing, whether you were Du Bois or Booker T. Washington, you were in the Black church trying to figure it out. So that's such a great point. You know what I would tell the ones coming afterward? I think about Elijah. It is enough, O Lord. Now take away my life. For I am not better than my fathers. I ain't better than the civil rights movement. Oh my God. I am not better than, the A. Philip Randolph generation. I'm not better than the Frederick Douglass generation. I'm not better than the Nanny Helen Burroughs. I thought I was. I thought Black Lives Matter was different. You older Negroes who fight each other. Oh, guess what? Fighting ain't germane and endemic to one generation. It's all of them, because now we see fights, one issue of Black Lives Matter over here, the other one over here, and they infighting. Ain't nobody surprised. That's just what it is. So Elijah said, now take away my life.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, as my pastor, Dr. Frederick Sampson, one of the greatest to ever do it, said, cancel tomorrow. Wipe it out. I'm done. And what does God say to Elijah? Slow down, Mace. You're killing him. Okay, not that part. Where God says, chill out. You're depressed. Get something to eat. Replenish yourself. Right? I heard a pastor of Alfred Street Baptist Church talk about the politics of replenishment, the necessity of acknowledging burnout so that you won't be ultimately burned out, right? And cast out from your own spirit, that self-alienated position. That's not just Marxist theory 101. That's a spiritual ennui, a kind of tyranny of the internal dimensions of our souls as we grapple for transformation. So God says, slow down, get some rest, get something to eat. And the thing Elijah said is, I am left. God said, let me take you up somewhere.
Yeah.
What you see over there?
Yeah, it's not
Oh,
just
dang, 7,000 others? What? Oh, you ain't the only one. You're not the only one. I would say to young people, take what you do with deadly seriousness, but don't take yourself too seriously at all. You are not the only one. I have meat you know not of. I got people in other pastures. I got a disciple waiting. I got rams in bushes. I got all kind of escape clauses. I got all kind of escape hatches. I got all kind of planned 25s and 26s and beyond the number you can name.
Yeah.
And the alphabet you can call. So God is God, and God has a way. And I think that I would say to those young folk, carry forth with your beauty and power, carry forth with your insight, carry forth with your new age energy, new age in the sense of a new epic, not new age in that sense, but a new revelation, a fresh one that you feel. But be careful about dissing the people who came before you, the bridges over whose backs, the people whose backs were bridges for you. Be careful about dissing the old folk like me, right. Much older folk than me. Be careful about, tyrannizing traditions with the trauma of the new for its own sake. Find the virtue and the value in the unique revelation God gave you. If you're David, say that you got 5 smooth stones. You can't try on, Saul's outfit. That don't fit you, right? My generation, I can't believe it. I've been writing about hip hop for so long. Now we got some mumble rap, and they be saying, "Mom, time, we'll hunt, die, we'll say, say." Know what I'm saying? Actually, no, dog. I have no idea what you're saying, right? And so there's a new generation, a new sheriff in town, but also understand that it was created by people who we could understand, the Rakims, the Jay-Z's,
By the way, have you heard the Blastmaster KRS-One's new album? It's hot. It's hot between the protests.
Oh my God.
Doc, you gotta get it.
Look, I'm for old people doing great stuff. Tom Brady, Liam Neeson, KRS-One. I'm for the old people, dog. So the thing is that we appreciate the new energy you bring. We appreciate the new challenge you bring to us to get out of our old fogey ways. That stuff is helpful. But dadgummit, understand that one day you're gonna be old. Yes. If you live long enough, one day your way will not be the way. And so be kind and gracious, even as you experience the revelation that God has brought to you. Be kind and generous to those who made it possible for you to imagine in the first place. That's why I always go back to that Howard Thurman quote. You're going to either be a prisoner of the event that is before you, or you're going to be a prisoner of hope. Because he said our slave foreparents faced the long rows of cotton, the rawhide whip of the overseer, but they were not tyrannized by the immediate because they conjured a new world by reimagining what could occur. And imagination is a different universe of possibility. So at that level, I would say to the youngins, grab hold of that imagination, appreciate those who got you where you're going, and understand it's a long journey. This ain't no sprint. This is, as the great prophet Nipsey Hussle said, this is a marathon. And if you remember that, it's a beautiful, beautiful path to pioneer and a beautiful way to go.
Dr. Dyson, this is the best way to bring back Can I Push It and to start our discussion for Black History Month. Remember, audience, February 16th, February 23rd, the Black Church on PBS, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please make sure you watch. It will inform our discussions to build off of this conversation we've had. I want to thank my brother from another mother. You can tell why he's so renowned. You can tell why he's a best-selling author. And Doc, we wish you all the best as you begin to make your transition down to Vanderbilt. Stay on the wall. May God continue to give you strength for your voice and your life. We need you. Dr. Dyson, thank you for joining us on Can I Push It tonight.
Thank you for the great opportunity, Pastor. One of the greatest decisions I ever made was to join Alfred Street Baptist Church. I know it's because of God, but it's because of you.
Hey,
and
listen, I put it on my resume. Michael Dyson goes to my church.
Doing what you do. Thank you so much, Pastor. Keep doing brilliantly and so powerfully what you do to bless us all.
Thank you. Can I push it? Thank you all for your time tonight. We'll be back next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. And remember, it's not my job to make you think what I think. It's my job to make sure you're thinking. I'll catch you all next Tuesday night. Can I push it?